All right, so a bit of a different angle to sort of start this off from, but that's because today we're going to be focusing on more of a fundamental thing, something that you're going to be using every time you cook or should be using every time you cook. I believe everybody within reason can, considering time, schedule, availability, those sort of things, can get reasonably good with a knife. And using a knife confidently and comfortably is extremely important, especially if you're going to be cooking a lot. And even if you only cook once a week, even if that's one opportunity you get a week to cut yourself. And I would prefer you not draw blood, because who knows how salty everyone's blood is. So, to avoid from having to, compensate for the seasoning errors there. But I think to start off, it's important to go over our equipment. So I'll be using this in reference just so it's, maybe more approachable, just to, maybe like to more accurately demonstrate what everyone else is going to be going through. Personally, I have Japanese style knives just because I prefer the sharpness and the retention. There's a bunch of information about knives that I am not a professional or expert at, and I will direct you to a great page that I follow regularly just to stay up to date on my knife terminology, making sure that I'm taking care of these properly. The best way to learn is to just start and understand the balance point of the knife. So with this, the balance point is typically right in front of the handle, but you can see, you kind of have to wiggle around to get something, but this, where you can hold it with one finger, you just wrap your thumb on top, and this is called the pinch grip. You're going to start from there, wrap your other fingers around, and then this is your starting point. Holding it at the balance point gives you a great sense of awareness of the knife techniques, and this is important to understand because when you are following a recipe, granted it be someone else's or my own, whichever, it's going to be really important that you understand the fundamentals to the point where when something is mentioned, a slice, a dice, a chop, whatever, that those sort of things are understood, and it's far easier to follow a recipe. Not everyone's going to be writing recipes or anything like that, but I think we can all learn to appreciate a well-written recipe once we know the terminologies. So I think something that is really important to cover before we get to this is how your non-knife holding hand should be. Some people do this, and this is super dicey. I feel uncomfortable even having my hand on the cutting board without the knife moving. But what we're going to do is curl our fingertips in and provide a flat surface for our knife to rest against with this knuckle. So, thumb back always, and we're just going to kind of get used to going up and down. And you'll notice that on the other side of the knife going up and down, you can't see my knuckle. So I'm not scared to cut myself because I know that the knife's edge is not getting anywhere near my knuckle. From practicing, the good knife skills there, and wow. Okay, now that we're back and finished being a jackass, I'm just gonna get straight into it. So make sure that you have a nice stud cutting board. I have a non-stick mat under this, so it's just not gonna move. Some people use wet towels, whatever. It doesn't need to be a wooden cutting board. It can be really anything. Make sure it is a cutting board, obviously. Let's talk about cross chopping, where we're going to have our hand perpendicular to the blade. This is worry-free cutting. I mean, you can really just go as fast as you want, as slow as you want. Bigger things take bigger strokes like this. So with that said, you can just obliterate an onion just by cross chopping. So we can just go in half again, maybe, and then you can just straight up. It's going to take a lot longer and it's going to not be nearly as accurate, but we can get this to the dice that we need, making sure to, don't just aimlessly do it. If you see bigger pieces, aim for those, cut across them, again, using the term perpendicular, but the more times we do that more accurately, the less time this is going to take. Now to slice this onion, or to go for a dice, we're going to always take the top off, which is this end. We're going to keep this end. The root's going to help us keep everything together. So what we'll do is bridge it like this to avoid from cutting ourselves. Move one side to this side. Peel the outer skin of the onion and also peel down to the layers that become firm. So this layer can be bent back without snapping, so ideally we would just take that top layer off. It's more so a problem with red onions. This is just a yellow onion, which I prefer for pretty much anything. So what we're gonna do is start by hand flat on top, cutting in, and then we're going to cut about 90% of the way down to the root, which you can see here. I cut to about here, and I cut lines into it. Now what I can do is turn it 90 degrees and cut the same width. And you'll see that we are greeted with this very nice dice. Now this is something that being able to do quickly really helps incentivize cooking more. Now if you wanted to slice an onion, you can take off the root end, turn it to the side, maybe put a little slice in here so it's pretty consistent, and then you see that we can separate these, because if you wanted to keep them together, you could keep the root in and they would sort of stay together kind of like this, but we don't want that for, you know, sauteing purposes, or maybe even putting in salads raw like this, or caramelizing. This is far better to keep separate. I'm just going to finish off the rest here. All right. So somehow I lost the clip where I was actually narrating this part, but to julienne this carrot, we're going to take the top and bottom off and keep the skin on. It doesn't really matter. We also want to make sure that we're not cutting anything that's round and could slide, so we're going to square off one end, being careful, placing it on the flat end to create a stable base, doing the same thing on all other sides. This will make a nice even geometrical shape so we can get more predictable matchsticks out of this. So we'll cut down lengthwise, trying to get the same width cuts each time, and if it gets kind of dodgy like that, you can, I mean, once you're more comfortable you can try, but I was just trying my best here to make it work, and I managed to do it even with this super dull knife. So now we can stack them on top of each other and proceed to almost cut yourself there, because this knife is not very sharp. But anyway, that's a pretty rough looking matchstick, but I think you get the idea. And to turn it into a dice, we can just turn it sideways. This is great for our mirepoix. We want something very small to be sort of diluted into whatever we're cooking. A lot of people comment on the way that I cut a bell pepper. It's something that I've learned just sort of from watching videos, but I think it's a really great way because it sort of cuts down on all of the time. So I'll just shortly demonstrate how I would recommend starting off, which is cutting at an angle like this around the core there, and then you could just julienne this. I cut into the flesh side because it's less dense than the skin, and the skin with a non-sharp knife or an unsharp knife is going to slide. And to, you know, practice the best knife habits, we don't want to be cutting or putting ourselves in any position that would allow for us to cut ourselves. And we can go again into a nice dice for some sauteing. Keeping it in a julienne or the matchstick shape is going to be really awesome for stir fries and things like that. Running out of cups here. Good thing I have 40,000 of them. Now, if you think that, you know, picking things up off the cutting board like this is very dangerous, I would say that it could be, but I always keep the knife's edge slightly angled downwards, but ever so slightly, and knives aren't really sharp tapping. It's only in the sawing motion against softer things like our skin. And I mean, this thing very well, with enough force, obviously that could really mess my hand up, but going very light with a light amount of pressure, again, and you can tell the angle of my knife, it's not flat, it's just slightly up like this. Light pressure, I can scoop things up off the board, moving in straight lines, not sort of wavering in any way, knife side or hand side. I can pick things up the board super easily and confidently, which is why we're here. So, before I get carried away on other things, we can use this, and I'll show you the other technique. This is going to be called top and tailing. We do just that, take the top and the bottom off, and now we can, normally I would just cut into the side here, but since we already have this, we can use this and just unroll, take the core out, and what's nice about that is that it sort of already takes out all of the membrane, the lighter portion that we have here. So very minimal trimming is needed, and we can get into, continuing our prep. Everything is about efficiency. With that said, I could just go at this like this, but to work smarter and not harder, we can cut it in half, stack it, or if that feels, slightly weird, you can cut it in half again. But here, I can just sort of push them to the same size. And then I'm doing twice the work instead of having to do 2 separate rounds of julienning. I hope that chewing is not too loud. But I always eat at least 30% of the raw bell pepper that I cook or cut, because it's just kind of who I am. But anyway, enough about randomly cutting vegetables. I think it's your turn. No, okay, don't use that. That's my knife. But you can keep that. Well, if you want to get this stoked by using a knife, woohoo! And want to see more of the videos, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be sure to keep them coming. See you next time.